To get started on this exercise, you should have downloaded the Lesson 2 resources from the class page. When you open it up, there are 3 different images that they're giving to you. The first one is naturally the final product that we're going to be working towards. Photoshop is best known for being able to take old images and restore them to their former glory. And there's a lot of nice little tools that come in handy, both for working in photography as also in working with graphic design. The other images, of course, are going to be your start image that we're going to pull from, and then there's the bonus image that you can do on your own later. Now, if you're following along in the book especially, there's another program that we're going to be using called Adobe Bridge. Bridge is a fantastic little program that allows you to easily find and organize all of your artwork and your photographs and your files that you may be using across multiple software. If you don't have it installed on your computer, go ahead and install it now so that you can use it. It's not always essential, but it's a great little tool to have if you've got a lot of different files to work with. Let's jump into Photoshop. From Photoshop, if we go up to File, down to Browse in Bridge, notice that it's going to show you all of the files and folders on your computer. Now specifically, I've got my lesson folder on my desktop inside of a folder called New 215 Class. If I wanted to be able to quickly access all of my lesson files, I can bring it over here into my Favorites folder. With the Lessons folder selected, I can go up to File and down to Add to Favorites. And now I can quickly, with one click, be able to find all of my files inside of that folder. Let's open up Lesson 2, and then from here, choose the Start TIFF. You can see that it'll give you a preview of what it looks like as well as the file information. You can also click other images and be able to compare them back and forth. Let's double click on the O2 Start TIFF. If it gives you any warnings about a mismatched profile or any color warnings, simply say OK to that. I didn't get those warnings, so I'm going to move forward. The next thing we need to do is to save what we're working on. Let's go up to File and down to Save As. Make sure you've got the Lesson 2 folder selected, and we're going to rename this O2 Working. The file format needs to be as a Photoshop document, so change it over from TIFF to Photoshop and say Save. The first thing we want to do is to get an idea of the size of our document, both its physical size as well as its pixel dimensions. One first place you can look at it is down at the very bottom left-hand corner. These are the document settings and information. And if you don't see them, you can click on the little arrow and you can see all the different other things that Photoshop can tell you. Make sure Document Dimensions is selected. We can see it's roughly 2,160 pixels square and has a resolution of 240 pixels per inch. Now, to see the physical size of it, let's open up our rulers. I don't see my rulers at the top and the left-hand side, so let's go to View, down to Rulers, and you can see how they're turned on up here. Also note that they're being measured in pixels, since this is how the document was set up. To change it over to inches, let's double-click on the ruler at the top. And this will open up our preferences, and notice that it automatically goes to rulers and units. Let's change our ruler units to inches, and we'll say OK. And now notice that the top and left-hand side are measuring everything in inches. The next thing we want to do is to get rid of any of the excess white area around this picture. And we can do this by simply cropping it out. The crop tool is found towards the top of your toolbox. It looks like this. If you don't see it, it may be hiding underneath some of these other types of crop and slice tools. With the crop tool selected, let's pay attention to some of the settings that are up here. First, we want to be able to set our document to be an exact size and resolution once we crop it. So we're going to change this to a predefined size and resolution. You can see there are several that are already set up here. In our case, we're going to choose an exact width and height and resolution. This will allow us to type in a width of 7 and a height of 7. Notice if I just type in 7, it's 7 pixels. Let's change that to 7in for 7 inches. Also, this will allow us to add a 300 pixels per inch resolution to here. You can see that now I have a bounding box around the area, and when I click and drag, it stays proportional to that 7 by 7 area. Now when I go to crop this, it's automatically going to make my document that size, and it's going to resample all of the pixels, either adding to or taking away whatever is necessary to make it just these proportions and sizes. In addition to cropping it, I need to straighten it up a bit. You can see how it's going off at an angle. So let's click on the Straighten button. This will allow us to drag along an edge, and it will automatically get the right angle that it needs to be. So clicking and dragging along that top edge will automatically rotate my picture into frame. With that done, let's click and drag and move our edges until they align nicely inside of the picture that you're working on. If yours is off by a little bit, that's okay. And if you need to, you can also click on the picture itself and center it up on the inside. The main thing to remember about working with this is that once we hit return, it's going to delete away all of the crop pixels on the outside. Once you've got something that you like, let's go over here to the check and lock in our transformation. If necessary, you can also go up to View and let's choose Fit on Screen, and that'll recenter it on our page. Now let's focus on getting the colors of this looking really good. You'll notice that the tones of this image seem to be very faded and washed out. It's an older photograph, so that's to be expected. In order to adjust the colors, let's find our Adjustments panel over here on the side. By the way, if you don't see the adjustments here, you can always go up to the Window panel and choose Adjustments from here. Back in our Adjustments panel, these are a variety of different things that you can add to your layers that allow you to adjust the look and feel of your design. Right now, I'm in Classic mode. If you click on the options at the very bottom, we can change to Modern View. This will also give you the same thing, but it also gives it in a variety of different little groupings. Open up the Single Adjustments, and we're going to add a Curves adjustment. So one click will open that up there. When I do this, this will also open the Properties panel. If you can't see everything on the Properties panel, you may need to either drag it off, or you can click and drag down till you can see all the different parts to it. Now, don't be intimidated by this particular panel. What we want to do is to set our lightest value on our picture and establish that as a white point. You can see there's a little eyedropper that's got a white value inside of it. All we need to do is to go over here and find what we think would be the lightest value in our composition. Right here on her back is a highlight of white, and so I'm going to click carefully on the back of her dress, and you can see that automatically readjusts all of the tones everywhere to let that be the brightest value, and everything else falls in line. Notice that when I do this, there's some changes that are made to the properties in here. You can see how it starts to branch off and split off everything. The computer's doing all the work for you. Finally, notice down in the very bottom, this has added a special adjustment layer just for the curves. If I wanted to turn on and off visibility for it, I can click on the eyeball icon and see the kind of a before and after preview. Another type of adjustment that allows you to adjust the tones is a levels adjustment. Go back to Adjustments and this time choose Levels. In the Levels properties, this gives you a histogram of lights and darks throughout your entire design. So you can see how there's a lot of light areas, not a lot of midtones, and then it falls off for darker areas. Every picture is going to be slightly different. What we want to do is to adjust the dark point and the midpoints. So clicking on the leftmost dark handle, drag it over, and you can see how the darks start to become much, much darker on your image. We're going to drag it over to a value of about 15, so right about where that mountain peak starts. We can also adjust our midtones. You can see how dragging it back and forth will adjust those as well too. Let's drag that to be about 0.9. Whenever you're adjusting the values, colors, and correcting the images in this way, there really is no set value that's right or wrong. What you want to do is to fill it out and make sure that it looks appropriate. Also notice that when I added this adjustment, it added a levels layer to my layers panel. Now at any time, I can always go back to any of these adjustment layers and be able to make changes to their properties. But once I'm satisfied with it and I want to lock in those changes and commit it to the final image, I need to flatten all of these layers into one background image. In order to flatten it, let's go up to the Layer panel and down towards the bottom, choose Flatten Image. Notice that when you do this, it gets rid of all of your adjustment layers and merges everything into one background image. Moving on, the next thing we want to do is to do some heavy lifting to repair our image. Notice that there's a crease or fold that's going all the way down from the top to the bottom on this side. There's a bunch of different little age specks and lines, and we want to get rid of this guy altogether and just have our family. Photoshop has a variety of different ways of doing this, and just like with any of the adjustments, there takes a little bit of practice and to know what tool works best. Some of the best tools can be found underneath your Spot Healing Brush tool. When you locate this brush, notice it looks like a little band-aid with a circular marquee. Click and hold on it, and you can find other types of brushes that do similar or some of the same things. And we'll get into these a little bit later. The one that we want to be able to choose is going to be our Remove tool. With it selected, if any tooltips pop up, you can safely ignore it by closing them away. Let's have a look at the options up here at the very top. This works like a regular brush, so we can change the size of it. Let's set the size of this one to be about 25 pixels. Notice that that's just large enough to be able to cover the little stroke or the little crease that's going on the page. Also, we want to make sure we're removing after each stroke and has that selected. With that turned on, you can click and drag over an area, and I'm trying to paint carefully on top of just that line, and when I let go, Photoshop is going to look at the surrounding areas and all the pixels and try to fill it in with what it thinks is going to look best. You can see how that's an almost perfect sky and you can't even see it. Now if necessary, this may take a couple of different strokes and you can go through and paint out all the different parts. Sometimes it's a little bit harder than others. You can see how even though I'm painting over this area, it still thinks that there should be a line on that one. Down here, this tool is definitely not working out very well. If this is the case, let's turn off Remove after each stroke. In this case, I can paint over an area and let it select a larger portion. In this case, I can go forth and do all of this. Now, when I click the checkbox at the top, it'll look at a larger area and be able to fill it in. So let's take it one little bit at a time. Hit the checkbox or hit return after each one, and then see how well we can get good results. Hit return or the checkbox, and that's looking really good. If yours is off by a little bit, that's okay. Again, this takes a little bit of practice, but eventually you can work it out. If need to, let's zoom in to the sky and see if we can fix some of the other little parts using this tool. I'm going to click and drag over this area, and once it's painted in, when I hit check, it'll fill in. I'm going to turn back on Remove after each stroke, and if I want to, I can look for some of the little blips and spots on the sky and quickly and easily erase those and get those back to looking good too. So take some time and go through and try to get out as many as possible. If you don't get them all, that's okay. The main thing is to get an understanding of how this tool works and how it can quickly and easily get rid of the different spots that are on your screen. It also helps if you have a clean screen and you don't see a bunch of spots on your monitor. I'm going to hit Command and 0 and zoom back out. Now this technique works well for small little scratches. Let's see how well it works if we try to paint out the entire boy over on this side. If need to, you can make him a little bit, or your brush a little bit larger, but as long as you've got everything on him painted out, we'll see how this works. Again, this tool works by looking at the surrounding pixels. And so when I'm finished with this, let's see what the results will look like. Ooh, not too good. In this case, this tool is not the most appropriate way of working with this area. Let's see what we can do by using some generative fill. If you've painted over him, let's go up to Edit and Undo Remove Tool and restore him back. Now, in order to do this, I want to quickly select just the outline of the boy. Photoshop has a great selection tool called the Object Select tool. If you don't see it, you can click and hold, and it may be hiding underneath your Quick or the Magic Wand selection tools. With Object Select, this will allow Photoshop to quickly recognize what it thinks are common objects, or people, or places, or things. If you hover over the boy, you can see how he gets outlined. Now with one click, I can select just him, or I can click and drag over his entire area, and this gets him, his shadow, and even the foot that it missed earlier. Now we can go down to our contextual taskbar and click Generative Fill. We're going to keep this blank and click on Generate. This will take a couple of seconds, but with Generative Fill, it's going to look at the surrounding area and try to get an idea of what should be there. Once it's done, you can see it did a pretty good job of filling everything in. I don't think the brick down here looks too convincing, so let's go over to our Properties panel and see our other options. When I click on those, it gives me some better options that at least has some texture to it. If you don't like the options you've got, you can always click Generate again and generate more options. But for now, I kind of like the look of that, so I'm going to keep that one. Now the last thing that we want to do to our image is make it a little bit sharper. If we zoom in by holding Command and the plus sign, you can see how the edges of them are a little bit fuzzy. In order to sharpen it, let's flatten our image one more time so that we're working just on one layer. Go up to Layer and down to Flatten Image. That'll adjust it back down to there. Photoshop has a variety of ways of making the pixels look sharper, but if we go up to the Filter drop-down menu, select Sharpen, and let's choose Smart Sharpen. This will pop up a dialog box that lets you click and drag around your image to see the different parts. Just like with the others, let's zoom in so that we can see this taking effect. Now the reason for this blur could be a variety of different reasons. It could be anything from the lens to motion blur to just it being a hazy day. Let's choose the reason for it under Remove and let it be a lens blur. You can play around with the settings, but we're going to set the amount of sharpening to be 100%, and let's set the radius to be about 3. As you increase it, you can see the effect starting to take place on your preview. The higher it goes, kind of the more distorted it gets or the more blurry it gets. So let's not do it so much. Around 3 is what it should be. You can also play around with reducing the noise, which will kind of blur out your image just a little bit by reducing the amount of pixelation from here. Otherwise, you can play around with everything, and once you're satisfied, simply say OK. Let's do Command 0 one more time to view our results. Now that we're finished, we're ready to save it up. We'll go to File and Save. Upload this final Photoshop document to the class page for this exercise credit.